first, let me make a quick introduction. And so we have Nancy Bell. Nancy and I actually joined the organization close to almost the same time. So we've been there almost 6 years. Nancy has about over 25 years of experience working with clients in this industry. A significant amount of that time is on the planning side. She sits on our investment committee. And if I had to say one thing about Nancy, is that she is the absolute advocate for the client. And as we sit in our offices, sometimes those aren't easy conversations, but she's looking out for her client and wants to make sure that we are always putting our best foot forward as we deliver whatever we deliver to our clients. And then alongside her is Shannon Stevens. Shannon leads our Trust and Estates group. She also sits on our leadership team. She also has a law degree and has worked at a large law firm, but also has had the opportunity to lead a trust group and a wealth management group at a bank. And if I had one thing to say about Shannon, and we've had the opportunity to do a lot of meetings with clients, is the client never walks away from that meeting with not something to do. Because Shannon is great about spotting things that should be addressed, and she has a great process to go through that. And so every meeting I've been to, the client is getting something out of it when she or he is spending some time with Shannon. So thanks for joining us here. I know this is exactly what you would like to be doing, is sit in front of 200 people with light shining on you and me asking questions. And Nancy, as I said, these are not going to be true and false questions.
We're so hoping.
The goal of this was really, as we think about retirement and we think about what that looks like, and we spend a lot of time talking about the financial side of that in financial planning. But there's more to it, right? And as we continue to evolve on what retirement really looks like, there's a lot to unpack there. And so let me start first with you, Nancy. As we say the word retirement, kind of give us a kind of history of what that word really means.
Yeah, so retirement has changed an awful lot over the recent years, and actually work until you die, until you can't work anymore, was the retirement plan heading into the 1900s. By 1920s, you started to see a flicker of people thinking about retirement. More retirement communities were being built. More golf courses were being built. As a matter of fact, between 1921 and 1930, the number of golf courses built had tripled. Gives you an idea that people were starting to think about recreation. And then pensions came along and Social Security came along, and people started to think that maybe, just maybe, they could afford to quit working and retire and be able to pay their bills and take care of their families. But it wasn't until after World War II that people started to think that maybe it was possible, based on kind of the euphoria of being after the war and getting older and everyone being really upbeat, that they could retire, do that thing called retire, and have a good life and be able to pay for it. But then in 1960, something happened that really changed the face of retirement for most of us sitting here in this room, and that was New Year's Day in 1960. Del Webb opened its first retirement community in Phoenix, Arizona. And they ran this ad campaign showing just how really fun it was to be in retirement and all these great things that you could do. And in their ad campaign, they coined the phrase, the golden years. And that's why today, when we all think towards retirement, we think about that being our golden years.
And so with that being said, though, Nancy, as we look at kind of that chronological order to today, how different does retirement look like compared to 20 to 30 years ago?
It looks a lot different. Actually, people today are living so much longer, and so with that, those golden years are turning into golden decades, and we have to kind of rethink how we're going to, number one, pay for those golden decades, and two, how are we going to fill our time with that? But in that longevity question, when we run financial plans for our clients, we look at male expectancy, life expectancy to be like age 91, and for women, we look for it to be around age 93. But if you go back 100 years ago, the average age for a male was 53 and 56 for a woman. And even in 1935, when Social Security became available, the average life expectancy for a man was 60 and 64 for a woman. So they were kind of counting on you not making it to Social Security age, right? And it was considered to be old age, really, at that point. But I think the really interesting thing is as you look around at people today turning 60, and there's probably a few of you in this room, 65, it's not really old. You really, none of us would consider ourselves to be old heading into our 60s and our mid-60s. And that's a real change that's happened with people living longer and being healthier. And if you think about it, 10,000 people turn 65 every day in the U.S. And 65% of them actually plan to work past age 65. So the odds of you living into your mid-60s and much longer, and perhaps 20 and 30 years into retirement, are pretty high. So you know that if you're feeling pretty good at 65 and you got another 20 or 30 years ahead of you, you're going to have some money to pay for that. And so we spend a lot of time in what I do every day is trying to help people solve that question or questions. Do I have enough money? And how long will my money last? And that's a really important question, and it's actually something that we can solve for by doing the math primarily and making some projections. It's tangible, can point at it and say, yeah, that's that money thing, I get that. Might not always make you happy, what you see, but you can actually measure it. There's a lot of other things, though, that go into the conversations that we have that are not about the money. You know, there's a lot of other
Just
stuff.
share that. We talked, obviously, at great length about this, and some of the things and issues that are really non-financial. As, you know, again, you spend, hundreds of meetings that you have with clients, seeing those. And so what are some of the things that you see currently that are non-financial issues? And obviously some of these may be very obvious, Nancy, I get it, but kind of walk us through some of those.
The 5 most common that we talk about or I hear about or I see people thinking about is going to be health in retirement. It's going to be having a purpose and meaning in retirement. It's going to be that concern that people have, what am I going to do if I'm on my own? It's a question about where you're going to live, and then it's a question about having the right support system in place for yourself. So as it relates to health issues, about half of retirees that are surveyed say that declining health is their #1 greatest fear in retirement. So not just from a money perspective, but also from just how you get through that, how will you manage your life if you have a major health situation come up. As it relates to having a purpose and meaning in life, the good news is that most retirees have a really positive outlook on retirement, and about 80% of them say that is due to the fact that they have a lot of purpose and meaning in their life. And so what does that mean for people? Most of the conversations that I have, people get real excited about improving their golf game and getting out on the tennis courts and spending a lot of time with their grandchildren and spending time in travel. I think what doesn't get looked at in that particular issue is that what if something happens and you can no longer play your favorite sport or indulge in your favorite hobby, or your grandkids just plain don't want to spend time with you so much anymore. That happens. And travel becomes a lot more work than pleasure. And so I think it's helpful if people can give a little bit of thought ahead of time before circumstances can change as to what else you might be able to do to make sure that you have a good quality of life and you still have that sense of purpose. As it relates to going it alone, about 1/3 of retirees right now live by themselves, so that means the other 2/3 are living with someone. And if you have a partner or a spouse and something happens to one of you, you'll be on your own, and that can really turn people's worlds upside down. It's pretty life-changing. So I think it'd be helpful if people gave that some thought too, is what would I need, who would I need in my life, what are some of the things that would be helpful to me to manage through being on my own. And sometimes it's rather sudden, so I think the sooner you can give them some thought, the better. Big one that's coming up lately in a lot of my conversations is where to live. And do you downsize? Do you right size? What do you do? And do you do it while you're still active and healthy and vibrant and mobile, and while your support system and the people in your life are also the ones that are going to help you move, active, lively, and mobile? really good to have those people in your life, but to figure that out? Or do you just kind of wait it out and stay where you are and hope if you stay there long enough that someone will take care of it or answer that question for you? So that comes up a lot, and I think giving that some thought and maybe kind of writing down some ideas would be a really good thing, and I think it's also helpful to kind of talk to your family and friends who you'd be calling on to help you get through that situation. Yeah?
That's perfect. No, that's perfect. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So Shannon, as we kind of flow to the trust and estate side, and you obviously have plenty of conversations with clients, what are some of the issues that you see?
So on the trust and estates administration side, the role that we often play is both helping people discuss their plans, what may work for them, work with their attorneys, and help implement and then ultimately administer those plans. So we get the privilege of working with people at all aspects of their lives. So maybe with young children, maybe they're empty nesters, and maybe they're retirees. And there are definitely themes and issues that permeate across all of those. And one of those is obviously have an estate plan. I don't know if I'll ever do a presentation that doesn't at least somewhere say make sure you have an estate plan. But beyond that, when we're talking about especially people approaching retirement or in the retirement age, probably one of the most critical things that we see, particularly when we step into an administration role, is what Nancy mentioned, is the support system. And we really do see differences when we are doing administration as to what is happening with someone, whether or not they have a strong support system. And when I'm talking about a support system, I think a lot of people think, oh, I have a power of attorney, oh, everything's, A-okay. That's not really how we view a support system. If you think of just the system in and of itself, it's bunch of parts that work together towards a common function at the end of the day. And so the best, I guess I would say, or the most successful support systems that we tend to see are people that surround themselves with a group of people. It may include family. Some people don't have that choice, so it doesn't always just include family. And there's sometimes maybe you don't want it to include your family. But there are also times where friends, but attorneys, accountants, healthcare professionals, financial advisors that work together in tandem to really do one critical function, which is ultimately to help you when you cannot help yourself. And that is a major, major thing that we see the impact of that, but I'm not sure enough people are having the in-depth conversation about their support system that they should be having and what impact that could actually have on both their retirement and their families if they do become incapacitated or ultimately pass away.
And touch on that. So, and I said that this was non-financial, but this is really a financial issue around the support system. Mm-hmm. Elaborate on what that support system should look like when it comes to kind of finances and financials and the concerns around that.
Right. So, I mean, I think of anything, all the presentations today, I think I heard it in every single one, is we're all living longer. Okay, so that's a good thing. We're all living longer. Medical advances are helping us live longer. But the reality is one of the effects of us living longer is that it also increases our chance of some sort of mental decline some point in our life. For some people, it might be very mild. For some, it may be much more severe. But the reality is there is a chance that, and it's really non-discriminatory. I know I've read a bunch of articles saying, well, maybe if you do this, then you can ward off some of these things. But the fact is there's no hard and fast safety net that says you are not going to have any sort of mental decline. We're all at that risk. So if that is the case, then what does that ultimately mean for us? The reality that we see in the trust administration, it can mean a whole bunch of things. What has been an interesting thing that we've noted as we step into a successor trustee role, as we step into a guardianship situation, is that unfortunately there's usually some sort of financial damage that has been done by the time we step in. So I think a lot of people think, hey, I have a power of attorney, I have my support system, I have my family, but here's the reality. We find that there's almost a window of time, a window before even a power of attorney or a successor trustee or family members even know there's an issue. And there's actually medical research showing that financial judgment tends to decline before any sort of cognitive function. So what ultimately may happen is there may be slipping in some way, shape, or form of the financial judgment of the individual before anyone else is even picking up on it. So what does that look like? Well, it could be so simple as you start giving money to people that you would have normally given money to. I mean, we've heard this situation over and over and over again. Well, mom and dad would have never lent money to this child or grandchild, or they would have never donated this way, or they would have never subscribed to these sorts of, subscriptions. So it can happen in small amounts, but it can also happen in more significant matters. In fact, the fact is, if there is not a strong support system around, there is the chance of damage, and ultimately, things like elder fraud are becoming significant enough issues. The government has been doing some studies in this, showing that annual amounts of elder fraud can be anywhere in the amount to $2 billion to like $36 billion. The problem why they have such a hard time figuring out how much it really is because most of the time it's underreported and people don't even know that it's happening. Because if you are that person, and most of us live in these families where there's one person that's mainly in charge of the finances, if there is no signs of any sort of decline, but there is that financial judgment that is starting to be impaired, there could be damage being done before anybody is even aware of it. This is where a support system becomes critical, because what a support system can do is mitigate or eliminate that time frame where we tend to see things happen. So a support system that we find tend to be the most successful are ones that include a group, which often does include the family, which often includes the attorney, the accountant, any financial advisors, healthcare professionals, all in tune so that they can spot when something occurs. And honestly, the families are on board with that concept, and those are the ones where we find the most success at the end of the day.
And so as you talk about that support system, and we've seen it, we've seen the successful support systems. How do we start that? Where should we go, or how should we kind of create that support system?
Well, first of all, you have to have a plan. So again, get your estate plan. I'll always say that. But I think the second, probably the crucial part is we all have to acknowledge that this could be, us. It could be any single one of us at the end of the day. So, Rick, while you get to end with the state of Illinois, I get to end with uplifting topics such as estate planning and death and incapacity. But the reality is these things are going to happen, and they're going to happen to a lot of people. And so we have to acknowledge that, a support system is only going to be as good as you acknowledging that there is a chance or a risk that some of these things could happen. I would say next, give some thought to simplification. I was just at a presentation that was giving a history of estate planning, and they were talking about how back in the day it's always been complicated, but even the type of assets were relatively simple. You had some bank accounts, you had maybe some stocks or mutual funds, but now life is so much more complicated. We have literally endless types of assets that you could have. We can place them at multiple places. We can have multiple homes, as you said. The more complicated and the more things there are to try to manage, the harder it is to manage. So give some thought to simplification at the end of the day. It makes it easier for you, and it would make it easier for any support system. Then obviously, yes, you got to get the support system in place, and I've talked a little bit about that as to the type of people that you would need around you. Really, you just need to think of everything. Think of all the issues that Nancy was talking about that people are asking and do become concerned with. Your health care, your emotional support, your finances, your legal issues. That's really what a support team should look like at the end of the day. And then ultimately, you have to let them in. This is by far the most difficult part. I guess now, having worked in this line of business for long enough, it's easier for me to talk about, but I'm not going to lie. I mean, thinking, these issues aren't necessarily pertaining to me today, but they are in conversations with my parents. They're not easy conversations to always have, and they're not easy to acknowledge that this could be us, this could be my parents, this could be someone. And so we recognize that, but you have to let them in. If you really want to have a system work, you have to share the information. You have to be able to give them the tools to be able to help you when you're going to need that help. So it could be as simple as letting them see bank accounts. It could be providing them passcodes to things. You know, we talk about this all the time, and I hit on this a little bit last year with when I talked about digital assets. There is a lot of information that we all have. When you stop and think about how much information you really have in your own life, it's a lot of information. And so the more that you look at that and consider, hey, if I really want a support system to help me out, when these issues, if these issues do happen, then I have to give them the tools to be able to step in. And what ends up happening is when we find that families are doing this, we see lower incidence of the types of financial issues that could come with a declining capacity at some time. And honestly, we also see it with the family members and ultimately the survivors who have been part of this process, because they know what's going on and they know that there have been steps taken and there's a lot of clarity in the process.
No, thank you. That's really good. And I think it affects all the generations. So as we, look at the audience here today, I guess my ask would be, when you leave, is what does that support system look like? And have you had those conversations? Have you had the conversations even with your financial advisor and your attorney and your accountants? And are they aware of those things? Are the children or are your parents? So there's a lot there to think about. And I think, for us, we would love to be a part of those conversations. And in many instances, we are, right? And that was kind of the goal of this, is to kind of leverage all the resources and meetings that we've seen. And I think it can be uplifting, because when you see it work and you see the success and you see the peace of mind of the client, it's rewarding, and it's great to see. So Nancy, Shannon, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
This is a stay here.
I think we kept us on time, and as I said, we will all be around, so please, we welcome any conversation, questions that you have. Again, I want to end where I started. Thanks for taking an hour and a half out of your day to spend with us. Have a great evening.